This video will show you how to create experiments using MediaLab. First, MediaLab has an excellent manual. You can access it at any time by going to the Help menu and clicking Help Topics. It's a very well written, very clear manual. It's easy to search and to find the information you need. So although this video is designed to help you just understand the basics of MediaLab, I highly recommend that you spend some time reading about the specific variables and parameters and things like that in this help manual. In addition, MediaLab also comes with a few templates, so if you want to see some already created experiments to help you when you're making your own, click on the sample section and you can see actual experiments that are created. They're saved on any computer that has MediaLab installed, just to give you more of an introduction. So MediaLab runs what is called an experiment file, but an experiment file is really a collection of questionnaire files. So what I'm going to do is show you how to create a questionnaire file, and this will later be something that you combine into a broader experiment file. So let's start with a questionnaire file. To create a questionnaire or an experiment, you have to go to the experiment editor. So here I already have MediaLab open. Once your experiment is programmed, this is where you would run it. But if you want to actually create one, click on Experiment Editor in the top menu and it will open this new program. So I'm in the Experiment Editor now, and I'm going to begin by creating a questionnaire file. So go to File, New Questionnaire. Unfortunately, I can't make this any larger than it already appears, so hopefully you can see this okay if you full screen the video. So the questionnaire file is a series of rows and columns. Each row represents a trial or a screen. So it's something that it's going to appear on the screen until the participant either makes a response or until the computer knows to proceed to the next trial or screen. The columns are information about what should appear during that trial. The first column, position, indicates the order in which the trial should appear, and position is always ascending. So if you're moving around your rows, so you're reordering your trials, make sure that when you move it around, you immediately click this renumber here, and that'll automatically update the numbers in the position column to match whatever order you've created. That's something you can do. It'll also help you avoid errors, because the position always has to be exactly in ascending order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So that renumber column will help you quickly reorder them if you're ever copying and pasting and moving trials around. The name column is the name you give the variable. That variable is a trial. MediaLab will save the data as both an Excel file and a SPSS file. And the name is important here. You should give this trial a name that indicates what that variable means to you, so you know what it is when you're analyzing your data later. The next two columns are the most important: item type and then question wording / file name. MediaLab is a really flexible program. It lets you do any number of things. You can have participants write essays, you can have them just do a quick fill-in-the-blank response, they can watch a movie, they can make a scale rating, they can listen to a sound, you can record their voice, you can show a Word document, you can show a DirectRT program within MediaLab. There's so much that you can do. And this item type column is where you select what it is that you would like to do. The second one is the main information that will appear in that trial. Now, the questionnaire file goes on for many rows, and all this information that I'm scrolling through right now, as I scroll through the right, is actually contained if you simply double-click the variable itself. So what I just did is I double-clicked the cell that says name currently none, and I got this dialog box. And whatever you type in here will, once you've saved it, it'll populate these remaining columns over here. So there's basically two ways you can edit it. You can type your information directly here, which once you know what you're doing, you might find that that's actually faster. But the more user-friendly way is to go to this dialog box where everything is clearly labeled. If you're going to have a number of trials that are quite similar to one another, you might start by putting that information in this dialog box. Once you've saved it, it'll automatically update over here, and then you can copy and paste here just straight down into subsequent trials. And I'll show you how to do that. So let's say that you want to begin your experiment with some instructions. So just a simple block of text telling your participant what they're going to be doing. So go to Item Type, Instructions. I'm going to give this a variable name quickly called Instruct. I'm going to go all the way to the left here. We can see that it's in position 1. I'm calling it instruct, the item type is instructions, and in this column I can write what those instructions will actually say. Now I can type it directly in here, or I can work in the dialog box I showed you earlier, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm opening this dialog box now. Alright, so in this dialog box, I type in what I want the instructions to say here. So how about we have participants indicate their current mood in a questionnaire format. And so the first thing we want to give them is instructions. So I'm going to write, on the next few screens, you will see questions about how you're currently feeling. Please respond to each question on a scale of 1, not at all, to 5, very. So this is just some simple instructions, and the default is that it's going to appear, on the top of the screen, just as a single block of text. The other variable, the sort of boxes that you see here, are for customization. And with simple instructions, there really isn't anything that we're going to need to customize right now. The only thing that would be important is the parameters column. So parameters are where you can have a great deal of customization for a variety of different item types. For the case of instructions like this, the only customization that you would really probably find yourself doing is where it appears on the screen. So for example, maybe you want the parameter to appear halfway down from the top of the screen, so this text appears right in the center of the screen. To see where the points of the screen are, so what you would indicate to MediaLab, the location that you want that text to appear, you can go back to the main MediaLab program, so over here, and then click Help, Show Location Points. This little image shows you what the screen looks like by location points. So if I say that I want something to appear left 100, top 100, it's going to appear right here. So at 100 points from the left or 100 points from the top. Left 100 would appear here, but if I do top 500, it would appear, or actually there is no top 500, so top 400, that would be down here. So left 100, top 400. So to express that, let's say I want it to appear in the middle, which is about 200 from the top and from the left. I would type in top 200, comma, left 200. And T200, L200 with a comma in between them, and open it, and this would appear within parentheses. MediaLab also lets you express it as a percentage, so if I want it to appear halfway down the screen, I can type in T.5 to appear 50% of the way from the top, and then comma L.5 to appear 50% of the way from the left. And again, this should go in parentheses. So that's something you could type here in parameters. Another thing you could type is the duration that this trial should remain on the screen. So let's say you want the instructions to remain on the screen for 30 seconds before it proceeds to the next screen. This would prevent participants from clicking ahead. It would require them to sit and read these instructions for 30 seconds, and then it would automatically continue. To do that, you would type D for duration, and then for 30 seconds, you would just type 30. So MediaLab goes in terms of seconds, not milliseconds and not minutes. So whatever value you enter, that value represents seconds. Alright, so that's enough for the instructions. So we'll click this check mark to indicate that we are done here. And now we can begin our questionnaire. So let's say that we're going to ask people about their current mood. Maybe it's a baseline measure of mood. The next item, if we're going to make it a questionnaire where they indicate on a numerical scale their response, we click on Scale Response. So notice that it automatically fills in the rest of the columns with nones over here since we haven't specified anything yet, and then it automatically gave it position number 2. But we need to give it a variable name. So let's say that if this is a mood variable, we type in mood 1. If it's going to be a 5-question scale, we could do mood 1, mood 2, mood 3, mood 4, mood 5. To save yourself later, sometimes I like to give a little bit more information on my variable name. So let's say that my first mood item is going to be how happy do you feel. I might type in mood 1 and then happy afterwards, just so later when I'm analyzing the data, I remember that the first mood question was how happy do you feel? And that's in fact what I'm going to type in right now. So I go back to this editing dialog box and I'll type in how happy, and I'm just going to put in all caps so it stands out. How happy do you feel right now? Question mark. So this is the question. It'll appear at the top of the screen, but I need to indicate what participants are going to be responding on. So let's say, before I said that they were going to respond from a scale of 1 to 5, 1 not at all to 5 very. So what I need to do is enter my 1 to 5 scale in this set of boxes over here on the right. Now the parameters column in this case, see how it says P? Here P stands for, the default P parameter is for how many options you want to give participants when they respond. MediaLab lets you choose anywhere between 1 option, I don't know why you'd only give people 1 option, but 1 option to 12 maximum. The default is 5, that's what's automatically entered here if you do a scale response, and in fact 5 is what I want. But if you say wanted to give participants a 7-point scale, if I change this 5 to 7, watch what happens on the right as soon as I hit enter, or sorry, as soon as I click elsewhere. We just got 2 more rows here. But I'm going to change it back to 5 because I only want them to respond on a 5-point scale. So now I can edit what I want that scale to say. So under the label column, this is what the actual button itself will say. A little gray button will appear, and you can put letters in there, you can put numbers in there. If you're doing a scale response, like a Likert scale, you would want to have the numbers appear in the button. It's important to have numerical anchors for each response. So I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pretty simple. Now for the text label, I want it to have a verbal anchor on each end of the scale. So I'm going to put 1, not at all, and then 5, very. The rest of them, notice they say none. None will automatically be blank, so there will no words will appear next to these labels. Some other things I want to show you here, there's this column called skip to. This is really useful. If you want participants to make a response that will then take them elsewhere in the questionnaire, you can indicate that here. So let's say, for example, that instead of asking people about their mood, I wanted to say something like, are you male or female? And then let their response direct the program to a different set of questions. So maybe I would want to show men and women different questions. If I did that, I would change parameter to 2, so P2, so I just have 2, so I maybe will do M and F for what the buttons themselves will say, and then I'll type male as the label, female as the other label. And then what I can do is indicate that I want to go, if they indicate male, let's skip ahead to certain questions, or female, skip ahead to other questions. And what goes in the skip to column is the name of the variable. So obviously I'm only just starting out, I only have 2 rows right now, but if I had many more rows going, and let's say row number 19 is where I started my questions that are exclusively meant for male participants. Whatever name I gave that first question in the variable name column, I would type that name here. So you type the name of the variable. And what it does is if participants select this option, it automatically skips all the other trials in this questionnaire file and just goes straight to the variable, the trial that you've indicated. So that's something pretty neat that you can do. Now in terms of how it saves your data, MediaLab will save participants' responses based on a 1 to 12 number. So even if I type M and F as the label here, it's going to save it as 1 or 2. So the number that it's saving it by is what's listed here. So just something helpful to know that when you open your data file, if they clicked M, even though I've given it the label of M, and then male as the text label next to it, it's going to save their response as a 1, because the value 1 is what appears on the far left here. But let's go back to a rating of mood. So 5 points, we want it to be a numerical scale of 1 to 5. That'll say not at all to very. I'm going to replace the female with none, turn this into not at all. So this is pretty easy, and we're basically set to go with this question, but the nice thing is MediaLab lets you engage in additional customization. So the default is that these options will appear vertically on the screen. So the questionnaire is the question itself will appear at the top, and then the options will appear as a vertical list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the text labels next to them. In fact, it looks just like this. You'll see a button for 1, and then the label not at all next to it. The font will of course be much larger than what you see here. Now what if you want your scale to appear horizontally instead of vertically? That's something that I actually prefer to do, so especially if I have anchors like this where there's just a verbal anchor on the top, I like to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 appear horizontally with the verbal labels above the numbers. To make it appear horizontally instead of vertically, I use the parameters column. So I still need the P5 to indicate that there'll be 5 possible response options. After that, I press a comma to give more information about the parameters for this particular item. To make it horizontal, use the W to indicate width, and then type a percentage. So for example, if I want the width of this horizontal scale to take up, say, 70% of the screen, which is the default that I use, I type in W.7. and that'll flip the answer options and their labels from being a vertical list to a horizontal row. If I wanted it to be sort of squished in the middle of the screen, that would probably only work if maybe you have 2 or 3 answer options. I could type in width 0.3. If I wanted to be really spread out, I could do width 0.8, width 0.9, and always test your experiment, always run it once you've programmed it, just to make sure that everything appears on the screen all right. If I do width 0.9, I actually might end up cutting off part of the text label, because with one being just 5% from the left of the screen, the full verbal label is not going to fit perfectly up there. So usually 0.7 works out pretty well for me. Alright, then I'm going to click check mark. So I mentioned that I'm going to make a scale that has 5 questions. If I want to sort of save myself some time for the next few, I can actually use copy and paste. So I just clicked now on Scale Response under Item Type, and I'm going to hit Control-C to copy it. And then I'm going to select the next 4 and hit Control-V. Oh, apparently I can't do 4 at a time. I have to do 1 at a time. Anyway, so I go 4 down, and now I have 4 more items that are scale ready to go. And I'm going to give them variable names real quick. So I'm going to say Mood 2, it's the second question, and maybe I'll make it sad. Mood 3, I'll make it anxious. I'll do Mood 4, will be excited, and Mood 5 will be, sorry, I should have thought about this in advance, guilty. Okay, how about that? Then, if I want to save time, I can just type directly in here. I don't have to double click and go to the dialog box to type the question wording, but I can. But I'm just going to type it here. So, how sad do you feel right now? How anxious do you feel right now? How excited do you feel right now? And lastly, how guilty do you feel right now? Now, if I want these questions to all appear similar to that first one I made, I can again use copy and paste. So I can just select the parameter here. So remember, P5 indicates that there are 5 response options. W.7 will turn the question the answer options, into a horizontal row instead of a vertical list. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it down for the next 4 questions. And if I scroll to the right, notice here that when I entered those labels of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I had the text labels of not at all, and then none for the middle 3, and then very for the last one, see how those are now saved here in these rows. So you can always get to this 2 ways. You can double click on the variable name and get the dialog box, and you can make edits here. This is very user friendly, easy to follow, but if you've already done one and you're changing a bunch of things at once, you can just copy and paste over here. So I'm going to do that for these next few. I'm just going to copy and paste these point labels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the text labels, not at all, none for the middle 3 options, and then very for the 5th one, and I'm just going to paste them down. That saves me time. Alright, so now we have our scale ready to go. Notice the position remains in order, 1 through 6. I have variable names. I have indicated the item type is a scale response. I have my actual questions, my parameters are set, and then I have the labels that will appear on the buttons, which are numbers, and then the words that will appear next to those numbers, the text labels. There are some other neat things you can do. Let's say that I want to randomize the order of these 5 questions. To do that, I use the WGR column. If you want a set of trials to be randomized in terms of the order in which they are shown to participants, you assign those trials all the same number in the WGR column. So since these are the first set of questions participants will see, I'm going to give them all a 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. What this does is when it shows this first row where there's nothing in this WGR column, it'll then proceed to the next one, and now it sees that there is randomization. What it's going to do is draw randomly from one of these 5 and show one of these 5 first. It won't show that one again, but it'll show these 5 in a random order because they are all assigned the same value in this column. WGR, by the way, stands for Within Group Randomization. So these all belong to a group. I'm indicating that by giving them the same number, and it will show them in a random order. If you don't want to randomize, just put none in that column. Now I can also have an image appear in the background. So maybe I want participants to rate how pleasant they find an image. If I want to simply show an image without having them rate it, I can go to Item Type, image file. And then when I click here, it's actually going to ask me to select an image from my computer. So I can go to pictures, and then I can pick an image. And all this will do is show an image. It'll just show the image, and participants will have a continue button at the bottom. They click that, and it goes on to the next trial. But most of the time, you're probably going to show an image because you want participants to do something with that image, like rate it. Because ultimately what you're asking them to do is rate something, you would still give it a scale response. So I'm going to click over here on scale response. To have an image appear, you actually use this back image column. And what you do is you double click on it. A dialog box will open for you to find an image somewhere on your computer. So I'm just going to go to pictures, sample pictures. Here's the desert picture that comes on this computer. So the image source will appear here, and then I can ask a question like, how much do you like this image? And what that's going to do is the image will appear in the center of the screen, hence the back image, so in the background, and then the question will appear at the top, and then as I did before, I'm going to put in some scale rating so they can rate the image. Now, one note I want to make quickly is that if you look in this back image column, I'm just going to make it a little bit wider, you see that it gives you the full file path for this particular image. In MediaLab, it's helpful to have all of your experiment in a single folder. So you can save a folder on your desktop or in documents, and this questionnaire that I'm making, you would want to save it in that folder that represents your experiment files. Put any image or sound or video that you want to show participants in that folder as well. Now, if you do that, you should actually delete the file path up to that image, so everything beforehand, just desert.jpg. And what that will do is it's telling the computer to look for a file by this name, desert.jpg, within whatever folder this file itself, the one I'm making right now, this questionnaire file, is saved in. This is helpful if you're going to run your experiment on multiple computers. So say there are 2 people collecting data, you program the experiment on your own laptop, and then you give the files to someone else to run on their laptop. If you leave the full file path that was created when you selected the image, it's not going to work when someone else tries to run it because their computer is going to have a different set of directories. But if you save all your experiment files in a single folder and then you just put the name of the file itself, no location before it, what that does is, as long as that folder itself is the same between your computer and someone else's computer, the image will show just fine. It's just looking for a file by this name within that folder. So you can copy and paste the folder onto many different computers and you don't have to worry at all about the file path. So that's important, something that I used to make mistakes on and I had to learn the hard way, that is how to make an experiment work the same way on various different computers. So now that we have our image selected that'll appear in the background for participants to rate, let's put in a scale response. So we could call this, image 1, and then if I wanted to give a more specific variable name just to save myself later, since this is a desert picture, I could type in image 1 desert. I'm going to double click on the variable name so we get our helpful dialog box, and let's say that I want to make this a 7-point scale. I'm only changing it for example. So I type in P7, and I'm going to keep it vertical, so I'm not going to add that W.7 parameter that would turn it into a horizontal list. I'm just going to keep this vertical for now. So if I'm going to give them 7 options, I want to give numerical labels, so I'm going to type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the label column, and then 1 is going to be not at all. I could also put strongly dislike, but I'm just going to use not at all. I like that anchor. And 7 will be very. It could also be strongly like, whatever you want it to be. And you could fill in the rest of these as well. In many psychology experiments, you just have a single anchor on either side. That's a Likert scale. But you could fill in the rest of these labels if you wanted to. Otherwise, nothing will appear. You'll only have a label on the anchors. Alright, I'm going to click OK. So the way this works now is that the image will appear in the middle, and then you'll have the scale rating on the top. Now, I'm kind of thinking about this. I don't know that a vertical scale is really such a good idea because it's probably going to end up overlapping with the image. So maybe I want to go back and change it to a horizontal scale after all. So I'm going to type in comma W.7. Sorry, just changed my mind while I was thinking about this. Okay. So you could keep going, selecting other images. You could copy and paste the parameters down. Same format as you saw before. If I wanted to let's just go ahead and do a couple like this. Something you could do that's really easy, by the way, is just copy and paste and then change things. So let's say we're going to show them 5 images. I'm going to copy and paste this row that I just made down 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then notice that obviously the position number did not change since I copied and pasted. As soon as you do this, immediately click this renumber button and it'll update the position numbers so it continues in ascending order. Now I'm going to select my next image, so I'm just going with the default that are on this computer, so jellyfish next. Alright, I'm going to delete the file path before it so it works no matter what computer I'm running this on. I'm going to change the name from image 1 desert to image 2 jellyfish. Alright, go to pictures again, sample, tulips, looks like there's tulips, penguins, and lighthouse. So I can actually save myself time and type in penguins.jpg and then lighthouse.jpg. And then again I would change these names. This becomes image 3 tulips. Sorry, this is feeling kind of tedious right now, but you'll just have to sit through it. Image 3 penguins. Oh, sorry, no, this is image 4. And then image 5 lighthouse. Alright, so all of my columns have helpful variable names that'll be quite useful when I'm analyzing my data later. Now, if I want these to appear in a random order, let's scroll over. Let me just make this column smaller again. So remember we had our WGR within group randomization to have these images appear in a random order. So I put a 1 for these mood items, and that's telling them anything with the same number, show them in a random order. For this next set, I need to give them a separate number. So I'm going to give them the number 2. 1, so 2, 2, 2, 2. And anything that has this number will appear in its own random order. If I had put a 1 here instead, then all 10 of these trials would get mixed up. But I don't want to do that. I want to have the mood items first and then the image items. So I give all the mood items the same randomization number, and then all the image items the same randomization number. Now there's this other randomization column called BGR, between group randomization. Let's say that I want these 5 mood columns to sometimes appear before the 5 image columns and other times after the 5 image columns. I want it to be randomly determined. To do that, I assign numbers in the between groups randomization column. The BGR numbers are actually going to match these ones. It's the same principle, whereas if you give trials the same number, it knows that they belong in a group. So I don't want all 10 of these to appear in a totally random order. I want these 5 to appear together and these 5 to appear together, but the order of those 2 blocks will be randomized. So to do that, I actually just type in 1, 1, 1, 1 here, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 here. And now what this is going to do is randomize in 2 ways. First, whether the set of mood ratings comes first or the set of image ratings comes first is going to be randomly determined. So it's either going to do these 5 first or these 5 first. That's what BGR does. However, within that chunk of 5, the order in which those individual 5 questions appear is also going to be randomized, and that's what the WGR column is doing for you. So you could have as many blocks as you wanted. I could have many other sets of questions, and then the BGR would let me randomize the order in which each of those blocks of questions appears, and the WGR lets you randomize the order of questions within that block. If you type none instead, then things will simply appear based on the position number that you gave that variable. Some other things, if you use the back sound column, you can have a sound file playing in the background. So if you want participants to listen to music, you can indicate sound here, and then you can have maybe instructions appear that say, please listen to this 1-minute song. And if I want to require them to not be able to continue for a full minute, then I use a parameter column. Remember before I mentioned D for duration. I'll type in D60, so 60 seconds. And then I could find, an MP3 file or a WAV file that is 60 seconds long, or maybe just short of that. And what it will do is show this text on the screen, and then it'll stay on the screen for 60 minutes while music files playing in the background. You could do the same thing with a video, or you could leave an image on the screen for 60 seconds. Always make sure you give it a variable name, so I might call this song 1. So that's something neat that you can do. So anytime you just want a chunk of text that participants will see, type in instructions. Some other helpful things are an essay box. So if you want participants to type an essay as part of your manipulation, so maybe have them write about a happy memory or write about a sad memory, select essay, and then give them your instructions here. So in the space below, please write about a happy memory from your past. Please write about the memory in detail, and try to relive it as you write about it. So maybe those are my instructions. If I double click here, you'll see the full instructions, and it gets cut off in the small space. I'll maybe name it my happy essay, click OK, and then the instructions will appear at the top, and then there will be this big box where participants can just type. If you want a small box, like maybe you're asking them to type their age, I'll click here and go to something called fill in the blank. Whoops, fill in the blank. So this is fill in the blank really just means a small single text box. So I may type in, please enter your age in the box below, and I'll type this, the age variable. So MediaLab is really great. It gives you so much flexibility. If you want to run a direct RT task within your experiment, so say for example you have baseline ratings of mood, then you have your participants do a lexical decision task or an IAT, something that involves reaction time. You would do your mood questionnaire first, and then you go to your direct RT task, and then you'd find the direct RT file, which is going to be a .csv file, select it, save it here, and what it will do is after these questions, it'll run that direct RT file, and then you can continue with some more questions. I'm just going to delete this for now. So MediaLab is really great. It's super flexible. There's so much more that you can do than I'm going to show you right now. You can pretty much customize anything. If you have an HTML file, you can do that. You can show a Word document that you create. You can do a PowerPoint show. I've never done that myself. You can have participants rank things. You can have them list thoughts. It's super flexible. Just go to this helpful help topics, this user manual, to read about all the different things that you can do. So in questionnaire files, you can read about all the different types of items and what you do with those and what you need to type, for example, parameters and so on. So it's super helpful. Alright, so remember that a questionnaire is what you build an experiment out of. An experiment is a collection of questionnaires. So I'm going to save this questionnaire file now. I'm going to save it as, hold on, before I save it, I'm actually going to delete this happy essay one because I'm just going to delete everything after my image ratings. Alright, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to maybe call it baseline cues to stand for baseline questions, that the first few things participants do are going to be a set of baseline questions. I'm going to create a folder in my documents for it. I'm going to call this experiment. Again, all your files should be in the same folder. So all the pictures you show participants should be in this folder that I just created where I am saving my questionnaire file. So I'll click Save. So participants are going to complete these questions, and now I want to have a manipulation. So let's say half of my participants are going to write about a happy happy memory, and the other half are going to write about a sad memory. I go File, New Questionnaire, and what I need to do is if I'm going to have a manipulation, I need to have a questionnaire for each condition. So first, I have one baseline questionnaire, the one we just created, that every participant is going to complete. So it's going to be the same for everyone. Then I need to make questionnaires that represent my manipulation, and I'm going to need a different questionnaire for each condition. So this might have only one item in it. If all I'm doing is having them write essays, that's going to be pretty simple. So here I'll type in, please write about a happy memory from your past. You would presumably want a lot more than just this, but for the sake of time, I'm going to only write that. I'll name it happy essay. Alright, and that's all I need. Click Save As, and then I'll call this happy to represent my happy condition. Now I want to do the same thing, but a sad essay, so I'm actually just going to modify this file and then save it as a new file. So I'll type in sad essay and instead write, please write about a sad memory from your past. File save as, this is going to be sad. Alright, so now I have three questionnaires, a baseline measure, a questionnaire for the sad mood manipulation. I want them writing about a sad mood, sad memory, it's going to induce a sad mood, and likewise for happy memory. So now I'm going to use these to create an experiment. So I just clicked on File, New Experiment, and you'll see it's a set of rows and columns, much like the questionnaire file, but notice at the top that the names of those columns have changed. So there's this condition column that's going to be really important, position, just like you saw in the questionnaires, file name, and there's actually background image, back sound, back video, parameter, within group and between group randomization, same stuff that you saw earlier. You can actually randomize whole questionnaires as opposed to individual questions within a questionnaire. So I want everyone to start out with this baseline mood rating. So I need to find my folder, so go to Documents, I called it Experiment, and here's our baseline cues. As with the images, the whole file path is going to appear. I'm going to delete everything other than baselinecues.que. .que is the questionnaire file that MediaLab, the format that MediaLab uses. So I'm deleting everything before it, so no matter what computer I use this on, it'll be able to read things from this folder. Next, for my happy condition, I'm going to have them write about a happy essay. So go back to experiment, click on happy, delete the file path. All right. And I should maybe have a third questionnaire that has a second set of mood ratings. I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to go back to this baseline cues. Maybe I want them to do all of these same questions a second time. Whoops. All right. Just as a heads up, you can't control Z in MediaLab, so I just accidentally did something. Now I can't undo it. That's kind of annoying. I'm going to exit out of this. No, I'm not going to save it. All right. Let me reopen that. File open. I'm going to pause this so you don't have to sit through this. Okay, I'm back. So here we have our baseline questionnaire. If we want this to now be a second rating, maybe I could do, I would want to rename these variables. We don't want to have two variables with the same name. So I'm going to type in T2 in front of it to stand for time 2. So time 2 mood items. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the images. So this is basically a pre-post test design. I'm getting a baseline measure of their mood and what they think of these images. And then I'm going to have a post-test measure. So after the manipulation of their mood by reliving a happy or sad memory. All right, so I've renamed these instructions. Likewise here, I'm going to change it to time 2 instructions. You don't want to have two variables with the same name. That is going to be a problem. SPSS can't handle that. So make sure you rename them. All right, now I'm going to call this save as, and I'm going to call them my DVs. So this is my post-test measure. You can also just name it post-test, whatever you want. All right, so use window to go back to the other file I was working on, this untitled experiment. So I start with my baseline questions, then they do the happy mood manipulation by writing about a happy memory, and then I'm going to have my DVs. So I'm going to click this questionnaire, delete the file path. All right, so that's a complete set of tasks for one condition. They start with baseline, then happy, then DVs. Now, for my other condition, I want them to write about a sad memory. All I have to do is copy and paste this below, replace happy with sad. So they're still going to do the baseline measure, but then they're going to do the sad questionnaire, the sad essay, and they're still going to end with the DVs. And then I need to renumber them, and I need to give them a different condition number. So anything that you want to belong to a single condition, you give it the same number. And it'll show those questionnaires in order of which they appear with this position column, unless you randomize them with WGR and BGR. So let's say I want condition A. I prefer to use condition letters instead of condition numbers, just so you don't confuse participant number and condition number when you're opening the program. So I'm going to make the happy condition condition A, the sad condition condition B. Make sure here that you reorder. Since I copied and pasted, we definitely need to reorder these as 1, 2, 3. So the first task is going to be the baseline questions. Next one is going to be sad questions, and then DVs. So if you have any questions that all of your participants are completing, like baseline and post-test, you should make that a single questionnaire. And then what you do is say, for people in both conditions, you're going to open up the same questionnaire. It's something that's constant no matter what condition they're in. The only thing that's going to change is the questionnaire representing your manipulation. And here you need to make sure that your condition number matches with whatever manipulation questionnaire you're using. And this is basically it. This is a full experiment. You can add many more questionnaires. You can even have a document file appear. So for example, if you want a welcome screen, you can go in Microsoft Word and then just type, welcome to the experiment. Please wait until the experimenter retrieves your consent form before continuing. You can have that be a Word document file, and then the first thing that appears could actually be that Word document. So you click on file name, you find the Word document, and so when participants sit down at the computer, they see that instruction screen before they continue to the questions. So you can add that here. That would become your first position, the variable in the first position, and then the second would be baseline cues, then happy, then DVs, and so on. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to run this experiment. We're going to go to Save As. So now it's going to save as an experiment file rather than a questionnaire file, and I'm just going to name this my experiment. It needs to be saved in the same folder as all the other files. Click on Save. Now we have a complete experiment. I'm going to close all these files, and I'm going to go back to the main MediaLab program. So we were in the experiment editor, but now going back to the main MediaLab program, this is where you actually run the experiment when your participants arrive. So before your participant arrives, go to MediaLab and click on Run, and there's two options. You can select and run an experiment, or select and run a single questionnaire. As you're programming your experiment, you're going to, again, make questionnaires first, because an experiment is a collection of questionnaires. You should test them out as you're making them, just to be sure that it works. But now that I've developed a full experiment, I'm just going to select and run an experiment. I'll need to find the location of it. It's in my Documents folder. I named it Experiment. Here it is, my experiment file. And this dialog box appears. Here, there are two things for you to type, the subject number and the condition. The subject number is something that you determine, and presumably what you're going to do is give each subject a unique number in an ascending order. So my first participant will be subject 1, the next one will be subject 2, then it'll be subject 3, and so on. So we start with subject 1. And condition has to match whatever you typed in that experiment file. So remember that I named mine conditions A and B. I didn't make it conditions 1 and 2. I think letters are better for distinguishing between conditions, and that's so you can make sure you don't accidentally type in the condition number or subject number when you're typing in these two values here. So I like to use numbers for subject and letters for condition. So I can type in condition A, or I can type in condition B. Remember, A is happy memory, B is sad memory, and then I click OK. Now I'm not going to click OK because I've learned that this program I'm using to capture the screen and record this video freezes when I try and actually run a MediaLab study, so unfortunately I can't show you a sample, but when you're sitting at a computer, and go ahead and do this, run it, test it. You definitely want to test it before you actually start collecting data. Now in terms of that data, when you run it, it's going to save it somewhere else. I'm actually going to pause this video, quickly run the experiment, and then I can show you where the data will save. Alright, so I just ran a sample of the experiment. If you go to your folder that you've saved all these files in, notice that there's this new folder called Data. MediaLab automatically creates that data folder as soon as you run the experiment for the first time. So if you click on Data, you'll see there are additional folders within it, by questionnaire and by variable name. There's also this text file. If you have participants write an essay, it's going to automatically create a text file for the content of what they typed in their essay. So if you click here, I didn't actually write anything, I just entered some letters, but it has the number of the participant, has the condition here, and then whatever they typed will appear below it. If you go to, you can access your data in two different formats. I find the most useful one is by questionnaire, so I'm going to click on this. It gives you many different files. It gives you an SPSS one. Excel is really the most useful. So I'm going to open the Excel one. It's called Experiment. That was my actual experiment's name. Not very creative. So here we have all of the data that has been entered, and the top row is the variable names. This is whatever you gave it when we were creating the experiment. So remember, I typed in mood 1 happy, mood 2 sad, so that shows up here, and then whatever participants entered will appear right below that. If you simply showed them instructions, they didn't enter anything, it's going to type in 99. That's the default for no response was made. But here the actual numbers that I clicked to answer these questions get saved. So that's how you access your data. With each additional participant you run, it's going to write that in the next row. So the first person is saved here. If I were to run it again under subject number 2, that would get saved here. The first column marks your subject number. The second column marks the condition that the subject was in. So you can prepare your data here and later open it in SPSS. You might have to clean it up a little bit before you import it into SPSS. All right. One last thing I want to mention about how your data is saved is that if you are test running your questionnaire, which you should definitely do before you ever run a participant, when you test run that questionnaire, it's going to create this data folder and it's going to start writing the data to it. Now if you realize you made some errors when you were programming it, you go back to the experiment editor, you fix those errors, and then you run it again, you might encounter some problems. And that's because if you changed the variables, it's going to try and write the next participant into the columns that it has created the first time it ever ran the study. So if you've changed some things between the first and second time or the first and fifth time, it's going to have trouble writing that data because you have actually changed the structure of the experiment. So while you're still programming things and you're testing it out and you're correcting mistakes, delete this data folder every single time. Get rid of it. So that way when you've modified the structure of the experiment and you test run it for the first time, it's going to populate new variables to match the edited experiment that you created. Because again, if you try to run it with the old variables and you've changed the structure, like maybe you've reordered some things or if you've changed the names, it's going to have trouble writing that because it won't match. Before you run participants, you might just want to delete the data file so don't have any of your practice rounds saved. And then of course once you start running participants, don't you dare delete that data file. You need that. That is your actual data from your participants. But you presumably won't be making any other edits to the program you've written, so it'll save quite nicely with each additional participant that you run. So that's the basics of MediaLab. There are plenty of things you can edit. When MediaLab runs, it makes these little clicky sounds that I dislike, and I turn those off. To do that, you can go to Preferences and then Mute MediaLab Sounds. So I unfortunately can't show it to you here, whoops. But be sure you test out whatever questionnaire file and experiment file you've created before you actually run it with participants. And then certainly use this help manual, this user manual. It is extremely helpful. It's very well written. It's clear. You can search it. MediaLab is a very flexible program. You can even have participants' responses to a questionnaire be scored by the computer, and then you can deliver them feedback based on their score. So for example, you can have them maybe take a math test, have MediaLab score it in the background, and then deliver them specific feedback based on their actual score. That is really neat, something that you can do. And how to do that? Read about it here. I believe it's an advanced feature. I think it's calculated scores. So it's pretty nice. MediaLab's a terrific program. And that's it. I hope this was helpful.